Hello and welcome to Hot and Heavy, the Elaine podcast. I'm your host, Shivani Desai. Today I'll be talking about Season 6, Episode 12, The Label Maker. Hello, everyone. It's so good to be back. I had to take a week off from the pod because I went to Cabo. My whole family, we all went to Cabo. I did talk about that in the last episode, how, the pre-trip stress was kind of getting to me. And, that's all true. It did, but everything went really smoothly. Luckily, travel was pretty great. It's just like there's so many elements. I'm sure a lot of you know this when you travel. You just never know. Our flight, it was bizarre. Our flight was delayed. I woke up to a text message from United Airlines telling me your flight's been delayed a half an hour. So I was like, oh, and we had to get up super early in the morning. So I was like, oh, okay, well, we'll get a little bit more time in the morning. That's always nice. So we did. We kind of pushed back our departure by a half an hour. But then on the way to the airport, I get a text, which I don't think I've ever gotten this type of a notification before, saying, just kidding, your flight's on time now. And so it was a little bit bizarre. We were fine still time-wise. We have pre-check and all that stuff. But still, I was like, that's kind of weird. Like, don't you kind of, even though you don't want your flight to be delayed, but if you've notified everyone, hey, your flight's delayed, people have probably made, adjustments to their transportation to the airport, their plans. But then to say, oh yeah, no, wait, we got it. We got it on time now. It was a little bit stressful, but it wasn't too bad. We got parking. It was super. We were shocked actually because we kept getting warned it's Memorial Day weekend and it's going to be crazy travel at the airports, crowds and lines. But I don't know, maybe we just picked a pocket of time that did not have that situation at all. So yeah, super smooth. So then we get to the gate and sure enough, it's on time, the original time. And then we board the plane and proceed to sit there for an hour. So we were actually delayed further than the original delay. Anyway, I think a lot of you know this. It's just, airlines, man. I don't know what to say except you got to be flexible. You never know. But honestly, that was the biggest glitch of the trip. It was so wonderful. I got to see so much of my family who I haven't seen in a long time. And we were all there celebrating a really great occasion, my cousin's daughter's wedding. And oh my goodness, her name is Pooja. Hi, Pooja. She planned everything herself. And she definitely, I think, is a planner, to say the least. Everything was done perfectly. It's like, it reminds me of that meme of the perfect blank doesn't exist. And then you see something. This was for me the perfect wedding doesn't exist. And then you just see everything from my cousin's wedding. And it was incredible. And plus the weather cooperated. Cabo, for those of you who have been there, you know this, it's absolutely incredible. And it's super, super gorgeous. Yeah, it was a fantastic trip. I'm so glad I finally got to see Cabo San Lucas and experience that. Yeah, I can't say, enough about it. It was a perfect trip. I miss my family already. It was, the whole family had so much fun and that's all you want, So all in all, successful trip. Love it. All right, now let's get into this episode. The synopsis for The Label Maker is as follows. Elaine suspects Tim Whatley is a re-gifter after he gives Jerry the same type of label maker she had previously given Tim. Kramer and Newman's game of Risk gets them in a fight with a very proud Ukrainian. George is unhappy that his new girlfriend has a male roommate who looks just like George. After a series of events, Jerry and Newman end up attending the Super Bowl together. This episode was written by Alec Berg, Mr. Berg, and Jeff Schaefer. All right, we start out on the street. Jerry is trying to give George his Super Bowl tickets because he can't go. The Drake's wedding is on the same night and he's in the wedding, so it's just impossible. George doesn't want the tickets because he'd have to pay airfare and hotel. He's like, this is essentially a bill for $1,500. Plus, asking Bonnie, his girlfriend, about the sleeping arrangements, that would be too depressing for him. They see Tim Whatley in the distance. Now, we met Tim Whatley in the Mom and Pop Store episode earlier. George asks Jerry, is he still mad at you for crashing his Thanksgiving Eve party? Jerry's like, no, I smoothed it out. I'm just blaming it on you. Now, I wanted to point out Jason Alexander sneezes right after. I mean, it's like the perfectly timed sneeze. And I'm glad I got this confirmation because I've always wondered, because it sounds too real to be a fake sneeze. And what a weird choice to just sneeze in that moment. Well, of course, it wasn't a fake sneeze. Jason Alexander just happened to sneeze right after Jerry says, no, I blamed it on you. And they actually yelled cut after that. I believe this was in the notes about nothing. So that they could redo the take. And they actually did redo the take, but they decided to keep that version where he sneezes. Because I think it's such a great reaction. It's almost like he sneezed in shock. So just something magical that happens, in the moment. Anyway, back to the scene. Jerry offers the tickets to Tim Whatley, who takes him, and he's so thankful. In fact, he wants to take Jerry out to dinner. Have you ever been to Mendy's? Well, this, of course, triggers Jerry because of the Banya incident. No dinner, no Mendy's. All right, next we are in Jerry's apartment. Jerry is on the phone with Tim Whatley. Apparently, Tim sent him a gift to thank him for the tickets. Yeah, it's a label maker, the Label Baby Jr. Jerry says, well, label me thankful. Bye-bye. There's this pounding at the door. Jerry is saying, come in, but turns out it's Kramer knocking on the door with the back of his head because he's carrying a Risk board, the game of Risk. He wants to keep it in Jerry's apartment because it's a neutral place. Newman has to leave. They've been playing for 6 hours, and that, he's like Switzerland. Well, Jerry doesn't want to be like Switzerland. Elaine enters and sees the label maker. She loves the label baby. She mentions how those make great gifts. She just got one for Tim Whatley for Christmas. Uh-oh. Jerry's like, well, I just got this from Tim Whatley. She thinks perhaps he recycled this gift. He's a regifter. Or Jerry says it could be an homage to your gift because he loved it so much. Maybe, Elaine says. Well, how did he react? Jerry asked. He said, oh, a label maker. How about that? Jerry says if someone repeats the name of the gift, they couldn't possibly like it. Well, Elaine's plan is to get invited up to his apartment to see if he has a label maker. Jerry asks, well, why did you get him a gift anyway? Well, he didn't charge her for some dental work, so she felt like she should get him a gift. Well, if you're getting him anything for his birthday, I'm a large. My take on this scene, this is a fun way to set up Elaine's plot. It's nothing overly hilarious, but it's enjoyable to watch nonetheless. I mean, the best part of the scene is the use of the term regifter because this became very popular after this episode came out, and for good reason. I think it's such a common thing to have done or to have been the victim of, a regifting situation. But until this episode of Seinfeld, there wasn't like that perfect way to describe it. So regifting just became part of popular culture after this episode. And when I think about it, I'm sure it's happened to me, but I guess it was done in a way that maybe I never realized it. Although, I think it's like, especially with like bottles of alcohol, I feel like it's really popular to regift. Because I do remember getting some kind of like weird coconut rum one time, and like the box, like the edges of the box were a little bit like, crushed in, and I'm like, this doesn't seem new, which I'm sure I don't think I regifted it, but I think I promptly threw it away because I'm not going to drink coconut rum. Sorry. I know I have regifted, especially with like my kids' stuff, like toys or clothes that they've outgrown, especially when they're babies because they grow so fast. I know there were a bunch of outfits, like newborn outfits my kids never wore, but I can't remember a time where I've done it and I haven't told the person. Like, I'm always like, hey, do you want this? My kid never wore it, or it's like barely played with. So I'm very open and honest and transparent about my regifting. I don't try to sneak it past anyone. I do love how mad Elaine gets, and you can see in her eyes like the mission that she will be on for this episode. It's a really fun plot for Elaine, and I think it's set up really well in this scene. All right, next we're at Bonnie's apartment. Bonnie and George enter, and he is immediately taken with her apartment. There's velvet couches, the hardwood floors. He even tells Bonnie about his love for velvet if it was socially acceptable. We know he'd be ensconced in it. A man named Scott enters from the back of the apartment. Bonnie introduces them. Oh, it's my roommate, Scott. And Scott just gets an apple from the kitchen and exits. And Bonnie's trying to get George to come over to the window. You can lean over and see the bridge. But George is a little distracted about the fact that Scott is a male roommate of Bonnie's. So, Scott's your roommate, huh? Yeah, I'm sure I've mentioned him. No, George says, I don't think you've mentioned him. Oh, he's great. You're going to love him. I'm sure I will. The actress who plays Bonnie is Jessica Tuck. She's been in, there's like hundreds of credits on her IMDb. I know her best mostly from soap operas. There was a time where I watched soap operas a lot. And with good reason. She's been on 3 of the most popular soap operas, Days of Our Lives, One Life to Live, and General Hospital. And in addition to her soap career, Jessica Tuck has been, like I said, in just about everything. And I remember her from True Blood as well. I watched that show for a few seasons. It lost me after like season 6. I really like her as Bonnie. Once again, it's kind of a theme for the girlfriends. They're not very dimensional at all. They're pretty basic characters, but I think she does a nice job with this role. There's not a lot to how Bonnie is written, but there are little things that Jessica Tuck does here and there, which aren't necessarily comedic, but they definitely work in adding to the humor. All right, next we are in Monks. George is lamenting to Jerry about this male roommate situation. He's an eligible receiver. George compares it to animals reproducing in captivity. I love that comparison. Oh, and the worst part, he says, he looks just like me, and he's working from the inside. George says he's got to find a way to, reverse this or deal with it because he loves the apartment. It's so cozy. And then he brings up the velvet again. Jerry's like, yeah, I've heard about this. Kramer enters. He tells Jerry he thinks Newman's planning a sneak attack. He saw him talking to the super and that he'd be a horrible world leader. Oh, and another thing Kramer knows is that the Drake's wedding is off. Yeah, he tried to change the wedding because of the Super Bowl. Big argument, and it's over. Next, we're in Jerry's apartment. George is telling Jerry, look, now you can go to the Super Bowl. Drake's wedding is off. He's like, well, I already gave the tickets to Tim Whatley. George is like, well, there's got to be a grace period. Are you even remotely familiar with the concept of giving? There's no grace period. And George brings up a pretty good point. If he can re-gift, why can't you de-gift? He gets on the phone with them and says, yeah, I can actually use the tickets. Well, it turns out Tim's made plans. You can't change them. And George is not helpful at all. They're his tickets. And then George has to leave. He's heading to Bonnie's. He's got to figure out a way to switch places with Scott. He's chomping on a pickle as he says this, and Jerry has to point that out. Well, the pickle breath is a good start. As he's closing the door when George leaves, Newman squeezes his way in, and he wants to get to the board. Jerry will not let him. Newman then reveals that he's going to the Super Bowl. Tim Whatley is on his mail route and offered him a ticket. Well, that's my ticket. Is it? Well, then you could have just saved time and given it directly to me. Newman. Next, we're in Bonnie's apartment. George and Bonnie are on the velvet couch watching a movie, and George kind of starts interrogating her about the different situations that may arise with them living together. Coming out of the shower. What's the massage situation? What if you go to the bathroom at 2 a.m.? What's the outfit? She's like, George, what is wrong with you? George snaps. He says, a grown woman with a male roommate. It's unnatural. It's an abomination. Scott enters at that point, and George greets him very friendly. Scott asks, does anyone need the bathroom? I'm going to hop in the shower. And Bonnie says, no, just throw my bras out of the way. That doesn't help George at all. All right, next we're at Tim Whatley's door. Elaine and Tim Whatley have just gone out for coffee, and Tim's like, oh, this was fun. He tries to say goodbye to Elaine, but she's like, well, aren't you going to invite me upstairs? You want to go upstairs? I would love to go upstairs. Wow, Tim's like, there's something else, Elaine. No one could ever put a label on you. To which Elaine says, we'll see. My take on this, it's a very short scene, but it's super fun. I love how JLD plays this. She's saying a very suggestive line here, of course, the whole, do you want to go upstairs? But since we know her intention isn't to like get it on with Tim, get it on. I mean, do people say that anymore? I am old. She has to say the dialogue with the want that Elaine has in that moment, which is to find the label maker. So I just love that performance. There's such an eagerness there, but it's not at all in a sensual way. But it is said with, such inflection that it's very believable that Tim Whatley would think, oh, well, she wants to go upstairs with me. Of course she wants to, I'm going to say it again, get it on. Hello, Sonny, you want to get it on? And this, like the whole going upstairs thing, like I feel like that was that was the line you said. Like whenever, again, I was such a nerd and I wasn't allowed to like do a lot of the social things growing up that like my non-Indian kids were allowed to do. So like I didn't go to a lot of those parties and stuff, but like I watched plenty of movies that showed the teen like raucous parties and all the making out and stuff. But like, yeah, that was the lines like, do you want to go upstairs? Oh my God, so-and-so just went upstairs with so-and-so. So it's like the whole implication of going upstairs was a lot of, there was definitely some below the equator action. I also love the way JLD delivers the line, we'll see, at the end of the scene. It's really good. All right, next we're at Monk's. Jerry is telling George how Tim Whatley is going to the Super Bowl with Newman. Who goes to the Super Bowl with their mailman? Who goes anywhere with Newman? Then they both agree that he is merry. There's a cactus on the table, and apparently it's an apology gift for Bonnie from George. Oh, the cactus should smooth it over. Elaine enters, very excited because she's going to the Super Bowl with Tim Whatley. Well, what about the label maker? Elaine doesn't care about that anymore. Jerry points out to her, like, you didn't even want to go. And she says it was totally out of the blue. We went upstairs to look for the label maker. Well, how'd you get upstairs? I said, do you want to go upstairs? Well, there you go. They both say, George and Jerry are like, come on. You ask him to go upstairs? Like, that's why he wants you to go to the Super Bowl with him. So Elaine has to clarify. So because I asked him to go upstairs, he thinks he's going downtown? Oh, you're crazy. Well, what happened when you got upstairs? Well, as soon as we walked in, she says he got a call from a patient with a impacted molar or something. So we didn't even get to look for the label maker. Well, this pisses off Jerry. He doesn't trust this guy. He thinks he re-gifted and then he de-gifted. And now he's using an upstairs invite as a springboard to a Super Bowl sex romp. I just have to say, that is one of my favorite lines of the series. And kudos to Jerry Seinfeld for that delivery. It's so good. And you see Elaine's face after that. She's like, oh, whoa, like, holy crap. All right, so my take on this scene, of course, I love the physicality, any physicality JLD does. So that little dance she does at the beginning with her announcement about going to the Super Bowl is so fun. The conversation about asking Tim Whatley to go upstairs is very funny. Now, it does sort of fall into my distaste of situations where Jerry has to explain things to Elaine. I've said this before on the podcast. I'm not a big fan of that. But I guess I sort of forgive this because of how determined Elaine was to find that label maker. So I think she was so focused on that, it didn't even occur to her about this like suggestive way of asking to go upstairs. Now, what I do have an issue with, get ready, people, it's going to get nerdy up in here, but I do have an issue throughout this episode with the ever-changing wants for Elaine. Now, in improv or any sort of kind of narrative storytelling, one of the things that's really important and something that I respond to a lot is you just knowing the want of your character. And that's exactly what it sounds like. Like, what does your character want? And many times, if you use the want of a character as like your North Star, per se, it really helps to guide the scene, whatever, if you're doing improv, like it guides the scene or it guides the story. If you're doing, longer narrative writing, that's a bit deep for Seinfeld, I know. But as someone who, like I said, is a total nerd with this stuff, I always notice these details. So with Elaine specifically in this episode, first we hear that she laughed at Jerry about taking his Super Bowl tickets. And then her want was established as okay, she needs to find out about this label maker. Like, that's kind of what she's doing in this episode. And then she's into going to the Super Bowl and doesn't care about the label maker. So we totally flip. And then once Jerry points out that he wants to go downtown with her, she's not at all interested in Tim Whatley. This is contradicting what she said in the Mom and Pop episode, that she's always had a crush on him. And then she's totally disappointed when he revokes the ticket after he finds out, oh, that's not her intention. And then she wants to know about the label maker again. And then finally, then she's totally into him when they kiss. Like, I know I'm sounding like I'm bashing Elaine's plot here. I'm really not. But I do feel that like her wants in this episode could have been smoothed out a little bit. And that could have just kind of solved my issue about it, because it's all about me. Like, for instance, Jerry could have pointed out during that conversation in Monk's, well, so what if he wants to go downtown? Don't you have a crush on him? And then maybe we could have heard her explanation. It could have been something as simple as like, well, I don't want him to assume it about me. That's a turnoff, or something like that. And also, I want to add, I'm in total support of a woman changing her mind about a guy or a situation. But I guess in this episode, it just seemed a little bit all over the place for such a fun plot. And I love JLD and Bryan Cranston together, but I just think some like fine tuning to some of the writing could have really made this better. It's already fun. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, just the dork writer comedian in me just needs some of this stuff to be a little bit ironed out. All right, next we are in Jerry's apartment. As Jerry gets to his door, Kramer comes out and he's watching Jerry's door. He's been watching it through his peephole because, fisheye sees all. And then they hear something in the apartment and we see Newman skulking around. They rush in and they see him climbing out of Jerry's bedroom window. I see you, Newman, I see you. And Kramer says he's taken the Congo as a penalty. All right, next we are in a taxi. Elaine and Tim Whatley are in the cab together and she tells him her confession that she had Super Bowl fever. Yeah, me too, he says. She asks, so where are we staying? Oh, the Ambassador. Big room? Oh, it's a regular room, but it's right downtown. What do they got there? Couple of beds? Why? Are you bringing someone else? Uh-oh. No, she says, but don't you think there should be 2 beds? There are 2 of us. Well, you can tell Tim Whatley's pretty disappointed with that. My take on this scene, right, even though I just went on and on about how it doesn't make sense that Elaine isn't into maybe getting it on with Tim Whatley, given that she had a crush on him before, I still love this scene. It's a great performance by JLD. I like how we can see in her eyes that she needs to clarify her stance on this Super Bowl trip. Like, that is her determination in this scene. The way she inches toward the sleeping arrangements question is so fun. And also, it's a great callback to George's earlier comment from the first scene about how depressing those sleeping arrangements conversations can be. Certainly depresses Tim Whatley in this scene. And I love how, this is the crux of why we love Elaine, right? Like, how direct she is about the 2 beds. There's 2 of us. Like, I love how direct she is. Also, I cannot reference going downtown without saying right downtown with that little finger movement that Bryan Cranston does. It's so fun. All right, next we're in Bonnie's apartment. She loves the cactus that George brings. I guess it does smooth things over. Scott enters. He's carrying a box and puts it on a stack of boxes. Well, look who it is. Bonnie tells George, I asked Scott to move out. Oh. All right, next we're in Jerry's apartment. Jerry points out how Bonnie rearranged her whole life for George. I guess she did. Yeah, he's gone. And now George is the man. Jerry points out to him, that's not a good role for you. He said, you unwittingly made a major commitment. Oh man, you wanted to be ensconced. You're buried. George agrees. Yeah, he was shouldering half the load. Anyway, he's got to go to Bonnie's to help tape up his boxes and get them ready for shipping. Jerry gives him the Tim Whatley label maker. He doesn't want to see it again. Kramer and Newman are playing Risk at Jerry's table. Jerry says, it's too bad about that Super Bowl ticket, huh, Newman? Oh, yes. I hope Tim Whatley's electric bills don't get lost in the mail. Could be lights out for him. All right, next we're on the street. Tim Whatley approaches Jerry and gives him his ticket back. Well, what about Elaine? Oh, yeah, he says it didn't really work out the way he'd hoped. Jerry notices that Kramer's car is getting towed, so he yells up to the apartment, "Hey, Cosmo, they're towing your car!" Kramer sees it out the window and freaks out. He rushes out of Jerry's place, but then he has to come back and take the board so as not to leave it alone with Newman. We see him running in the street with the board, trying to stop the tow of his car, but it's too late. All right, next we're in Bonnie's apartment. George enters and everything is gone. The table, the stereo, the VCR, the velvet. Where's the velvet? They were all his, she says. Besides, we don't need those things. We have each other. She hugs him, and George is clearly not in agreement of that. Next, we're on the subway. Kramer and Newman are on the way to get his car from the impound lot, and they're playing Risk on the train. Kramer is kicking his butt. He's really talking some trash. And Newman points out he still has troops in the Ukraine. Oh, Kramer makes fun of that. He says it's weak, it's feeble. There's a Ukrainian man standing nearby, and he does not like that. You know, say Ukraine weak. Yeah, well, we're playing a game here, pal. Ukraine is game to you! And then he smashes the board with his fist. All right, next we're on Tim Whatley's stoop. Tim gets to his door, and Elaine is there. "Hello, Tim," scares him. She says, "Don't worry, I'm not here to yell at you." But she does want her label maker back. "But you gave it to me." "But you gave me a ticket to the Super Bowl." "Cough it up, Whatley." Okay. She chuckles. "You don't have the label maker, do you?" "No." "I knew it. You're a re-gifter," she says. And then he tells her how it was the worst gift he'd ever gotten. The labels would fall right off 10 minutes after putting it on. Well, Elaine gets really emotional. She bought it for him because he was so nice not to charge her for the dental work. The way he worked on her filling, it was just so gentle and so caring and so sensitive. "Oh, Elaine." And then they kiss. And then we see a quick scene of Scott's boxes on the truck, and the labels are indeed falling off from the Label Baby Jr. My take on this scene, I love this scene. We flipped again with Elaine's wants, but come on. The performances here are amazing by Bryan Cranston and JLD. Bryan Cranston, when he gets all fired up about how shitty the label maker was, is so great. I love the little pointing of the finger. The emphatic way he says it was the worst gift he'd ever got. And then we get choked up Elaine, which never ceases to make me laugh. I love it. The way she goes on about his kindness. And then that sudden shift at the end when she says, "So sensitive." It's so incredibly well done. No surprise. It's JLD after all. And then, of course, the "Oh, Elaine." That gets me every time, too. All right, next, we are in the stands of the Super Bowl. Jerry is finding his seat, and who is next to him? Oh, Newman. He says Tim couldn't make it. He's in love. All right, next we're at Bonnie's apartment. George enters with the TV because Bonnie wants to watch the Super Bowl and asks, "Do you have some towels that we can put down? It's like a 4-hour game." She tells him that Scott's going to stop by. He says he never got his boxes. Then she goes to get the towels. Oh, God, George is like, "How am I going to get out of this?" Oh, wait a second. We can see in his face. He's got an idea. When she comes out with the towels, George tells her he just had a pretty wild idea. And he suggests a menage a trois, call back to the Switch episode. He's thinking it's going to disgust her. And her reaction, right? She's like, "What?" She does look a little shocked. Scott enters at that point. Bonnie turns around and tells him, "Remember that thing we talked about a few days ago?" George is into it. "Oh, really?" And Scott starts slowly approaching George, who, of course, is horrified. Backfired yet again. And then the episode does have a tag. Newman is just smushed into Jerry, talking his ear off, talks about how great his luck has been lately. He narrowly escapes the Risk loss to Kramer. Tim Whatley gives him the ticket, and then a bunch of boxes with no labels showed up at the post office, obviously Scott's boxes. And that means freebies. Jerry's just like, "An inch. Can you move over an inch?" All right, I'm going to take a quick break, and I will see you on the other side. Oh, yeah. That's right, Doctor. That's my line of scrimmage right there. I see it. I'm going right downtown. You've seen him host a sexy evening in Thanksgiving Eve, Pop My Woodpecker. Now Dr. Tim Whatley is back, in a brand new sexy adventure during the climax of NFL season in Super Bowl Sex Romp. Our favorite desirable dentist to the stars hosts another type of party during the Super Bowl. And let's just say, there's no halftime show at this game.
Your teeth look great, Jane. No need to see you for another 6 months. Or, if you're interested, we could see each other in 6 days at the Super Bowl.
Oh, really? You have tickets to the Super Bowl?
Well, let's just say my tickets will have access to a very specific end zone. We may not be able to see the game up close, but I'm sure I'll get close to the backfield. There may not be stadium cheers, but every time I touch down there, you'll be making some noises. There will be a lot of wide receiving. Your tight end.
I get it, Doctor. I get it. And, yeah, I'll be on your special team. Get ready to get turned on as Dr. Tim Whatley and his pigskin pack of partners run the most erotic plays the Ambassador Hotel has ever seen.
Pink 69! Stink 69! Snap!
Oh, Doctor, sack me! Sack me!
I'm calling an audible! Penis Blitz!
Tune in this January for Super Bowl Sex Romp, only on Cinemax, or stream it on The Cock, Peacock's raunchier streaming service. We put the stream in streaming. Super Bowl Sex Romp. Dental Dam. And we're back. All right, in the inside look for this episode, there were a couple things. JLD admitted to not knowing what a label maker was before this episode, but apparently has loved them ever since. She loves to label everything now. Another little tidbit, which I thought was interesting. Apparently, JLD was super sick filming the episode. She had like a really bad sinus infection or something. And Bryan Cranston was also interviewed in the inside look. And he says that the day that they shot the scene of the kiss, she looked at him and she goes, "I'm so sorry, but I'm sick." And he's like, "Oh no." And sure enough, he said 2 days later he got sick, but he didn't really mind saying, "Yeah, I got it from Julia Louis-Dreyfus." He's like, that was actually pretty cool to admit. All right, now it's time to open Greg's Sack Lunch. Greg is our most dedicated contributor to this podcast, and every week he sends us his thoughts in a sack lunch. So let's go ahead and open Greg's sack. The first thing I find is his favorite scene and Elaine moments. He says, Elaine once again sort of divides the meat of this episode with Jerry sort of ping-ponging amongst all three of his pals. And of course, Kramer with Newman gets a thrown-in goofy storyline. I do love how Jerry and George explained to Elaine how it was her asking Tim to come upstairs. That was the reason he invited her to the Super Bowl. I so much love the line, "You ask him to go upstairs like you're Mae West?" Maybe that joke would be lost on younger generations, but it's such a great reference. And I love how Elaine sort of realizes it in the moment that they're right. Yes, again, like I said earlier, not a big fan when Elaine has to be explained things by Jerry, but I do think her focus on that label maker was just so strong, which does track with Elaine, you have to admit. I'm willing to kind of overlook that. Yeah, the Mae West thing is great. So she was kind of known to be a very raunchy actress for her time. So it is a great reference. And I actually learned that just in the notes about nothing. I'm not a Mae West expert by any means, but I don't know. It's like, I guess I knew enough about her at the time that it was a very, valid reference. Okay, so I just actually Googled Mae West, and her most famous line was from a 1933 film, She Done Him Wrong, and she played the character Lady Lou, and her line is, "Come up and see me sometime." So that's a direct reference to the whole "Do you want to go upstairs" line from Elaine. Greg goes on to say, Elaine's best scene to me, though, is when she is in the back of the cab basically telling Tim she's not going to share a bed with him as she's questioning the accommodations. Cranston's face as he realizes she's not going to put out is priceless. These two have such a great dynamic. I don't get why she would go with Tim if she wasn't interested in him romantically to begin with. We know she likes him from a previous episode, so I don't really get what she was expecting when he's basically asking her on a trip. If she wouldn't have gone with Jerry, why would she go with Tim? The more I think about it, the more I sort of get Tim's side here. He's thinking she's into him, or why else would she go with her dentist on a trip? She could have booked her own hotel room, but she left that in his hands. I think she's more bothered by the presumption that she would hook up with him, not so much that she wouldn't have. I feel like possibly men and women view this plotline very differently. Wow, like you bring up so many good points here, Greg. And I think it kind of feeds into my whole want thing here. Yeah, I think it's very logical for Tim to believe what he believes. I mean, but I also think, Elaine can get a little bit, how shall we say, fiery about things that aren't, warranted, like an exclamation point, for example. So I do think you're right. I think it's the presumption that pisses her off more than anything, which is why, like I had pointed out before, I feel like someone needed to point out, and it should have been Jerry because she says it to Jerry in the mom and pop store. I've always had a crush on Tim Whatley. Why can't he ask me out? So it's like, it's been established she likes Tim Whatley. So I feel like Jerry at some point would have been like, well, you like him. You said you had a crush on him. Like, what's the big deal? Well, he shouldn't assume it or something like that. It would have just made the whole kind of flip-flopping of Elaine a little bit more earned, to me at least. So yeah, I'm totally on your side here. I totally see it from your point of view. I do think maybe men and women would view this differently. I think Bryan Cranston is so hot and he can totally get it, especially as Tim Whatley. So I don't understand why she wouldn't want to hook up with him, just personally. So I don't know. I'm a little bit at odds with Elaine on this one. All right, next, Greg says, I do love when she confronts him and when he explains the gift sucked and she breaks down in tears. On the verge of tears, Elaine is one of my favorite Elaines. And that scene between them is fantastic as well. Totally agree. I love it. I love it too. All right, next in Greg's sack is his scene swap idea. He says, I don't know that I would swap out any scenes as much as I wish there was just more interaction between George and Elaine. Her input on his story would have been very interesting. We get only one scene of them together at the diner, and that's arguably the best scene of the episode. The magic of this show is when all four, or at least the non-Kramer three, are together talking. I just always want more of that. Totally agreed. I love when they're all weighing in on their different life issues and stuff. I think that's great. And I do think it's all four. But you're right. I mean, if Kramer can't be there, the non-Kramer three, that's a great name for a band or an improv troupe. The non-Kramer three, everyone. Yeah, I totally agree, Greg. All right. And then the last thing I find in Greg's sack are his extra thoughts. He says, Bryan Cranston was excellent as Tim Whatley, and I love how he continued to come back as a love option for Elaine, but also as a nemesis to Jerry, even if under the guise of friendship or a patient dentist. I do think that if someone gives you Super Bowl tickets, which are worth thousands of dollars, you should get them something better than a label maker. While David Puddy is a great character later, I think Tim Whatley is the most interesting love interest Elaine has throughout the series and the one she had the most chemistry with. I'm greedy. I just wanted more of him on the show. Lastly, I believe this show invented the term regifting. I had never heard it before this aired, so kudos to them to actually adding yet another word to our vernacular. Okay, let's get through this. Yeah, I'm greedy too. I want more Tim Whatley as well. I think that I'm trying to remember now, does he come back as a love interest again for Elaine? I think this might have been the last of it. He does come back for sure. I can't think of it in the moment right now. But anyway, I agree. Bryan Cranston obviously is just one of the best actors of this generation. And the chemistry between, when you have actors like Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Bryan Cranston together, that's just going to be magic. So I'm greedy too, Greg. I would have wanted a lot more of him on the show. And you are completely right. Regifting absolutely became part of the pop culture vernacular after this episode. They definitely talk a lot about that on the inside look for this episode, how, it sort of blew up. Thank you so much, Greg. I'm going to go ahead and close Greg's sack lunch. All right, my favorite Elaine moments. The choked up Elaine at the end. It's so fun, so hilarious. When she's on the verge of tears, like Greg says, it's just nothing funnier. And again, as I've talked about before, we see JLD do a shift, like a really fast shift with her mood. So in this scene that I'm talking about, where she gets choked up, we see her in the beginning being so pissed. And then we see her get so emotional at the end. I mean, I just love to see that range in a matter of seconds. And of course, JLD pulls it off masterfully. My final notes for the episode. There are so many positives for Elaine's plot here. I know I spent some time pointing out some of the flaws, and those are just, again, really specific to my tastes. But to see Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Bryan Cranston together with their fantastic chemistry, it's so fun. Like I said, just a few tweaks would have smoothed out some of those issues for me. Of course, the usual, I want more Elaine in the episode. More Elaine and Tim Whatley together would have been great. I do have to say, I'm so uninterested in the whole Risk thing with Kramer and Newman. It's such a throwaway plot to me. Poor Michael Richards gets screwed over with shit like this all the time. And then, of course, sounding like a broken record. I would have loved to see more George and Elaine interaction, just like Greg. Her thoughts, I'm echoing exactly what you said, Greg. Her thoughts on that whole male roommate situation would have been so fun. So yeah, we needed more of that. For me, the scene swap ideas really, they all entail scrapping the Risk crap altogether. Get Kramer involved with the other plots somehow. Any of them, I don't care, but just get rid of the Risk. It's so stupid. Overall, I do enjoy this episode. Really, really fun moments. And yeah, Bryan Cranston. What more could you want? And I think that's all I can say about the label maker. Please make sure to follow Hot and Heavy on social media. You can find Hot and Heavy on Instagram at Hot Heavy Elaine, on TikTok at Elaine Bennis Podcast. And if you'd like to email me any thoughts, please do at elainepodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.